Hi there, I'm Eric Wordweaver Sjerven, Gothi of the Ridgar folk here in East Texas, and I'd like to welcome you to The Raven's Call. This is a show where I ramble on about different heathen-related subjects, just kind of whatever strikes my fancy, sets my mind on fire at the time. Big UPG warning at the beginning of these episodes, like always. This is simply the way that I view the world, and this is the insights of one heathen here in East Texas. Regional differences, cultural differences, all apply. And I am by no means an expert on anything in the field. I am simply a guy who is searching and trying to live his best life. And I appreciate all of the support and continued viewership that you guys give. I really do, really appreciate it. Everything that I do with the channel is intended to just be talking points, starting of conversations, maybe to get you think outside the box a little bit, reevaluate some things, or maybe explore some areas of heathen life that don't normally get explored in most channels. So this is definitely going to be one of those today, I think. So hopefully you guys will enjoy it. All of my feedback stuff is down below. Join the Facebook group. That's how a lot of conversation goes along. There's some really good people on the channel that have got their own life experiences, their own insights, and are just great. I've seen some very good conversations take place there. You can check me out on all my other email, P.O. box, all that stuff is down below. So feel free to grab whatever you need to contact. I am behind on my emails right now. I talk a bit about it in the cutting room floor. You'll see it. But I am going to get caught up on those. I really like the emails. I thank you very much for sending them. And 2020 has been a year, so I will get caught up on those just as soon as I can. Obviously, I have to kind of prioritize things these days, and step at a time. You know how it is. And I said this in the post too, but thank you all that have watched the commercial that I made for my dad's company, Acme Supply. I really appreciate the feedback and just the general views of it. Feel free to share it around if you so choose. Any support that you give for the company is an indirect support of the channel because it allows me to continue doing what I'm doing. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's subject. Today's subject is due to a write-in request, but I'm not going to shout out the individual on the channel directly because it is kind of a sensitive subject, and I didn't clear with them ahead of time to do this. And even if I did, it doesn't feel to me like one that necessarily needs to be shouted out. And I think that'll make sense here in a second. I want to talk about foster care and heathenry, because this is something that is a very real part of our world today. I know there's a lot of heathens out there that do foster children, that are involved in the foster care world in some way, shape, form, or fashion. The individual that wrote in to me has been experiencing something that I have seen numerous times during my time in the field. Now, as you all know, I no longer work in the field, but I do have 15 years experience running an emergency care shelter for CPS kids. My degree is in psychology. My whole adult life has been dealing in CPS kids. That's just what I've done. Now I'm trying to branch out of that into something else, trying to get back to my roots on a few things, but I do have a lot of real-world, boots-on-the-ground experience in this field. So when he wrote in and said that he was experiencing a particular problem, his wife has got some health issues, and they foster. They've fostered several kids before, and they are no stranger to the world of foster care or the problems that can come up with it. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with how that process works, foster families have to go through a great deal of training and certification with the state in order to be able to become a foster family. Most foster families, at least in Texas, are not directly contracted with the state. They go through an organization. There are several organizations that serve as case management, placement, individuals, things like that, that handle the administrative side of the foster care system and support the foster families. They certify and, they support their foster families through training, certifications, placement referrals, things like that. And so the individuals within the family get to they don't have to do quite as much of the administrative side. Now, there is a ton of stuff that foster parents have to do. It is a full-time job, and most foster parents do have full-time jobs as well. There are a growing number of stipulations, at least within the state of Texas, and I know there are with other states as well, where they limit the amount of time that parents can be out of the house, trying to increase parental presence in the house more than anything else, to be there with the kids, because a lot of families, in order to try and make ends meet, will foster, and then they will also both have to work, or it's a single parent kind of situation, and that parent still has to work. And so it makes it difficult to balance life and the obligations that we take on. That's a big key word that we're going to talk about here today, is obligations and level of obligation when it comes to things with regards to fostering. Now, fostering is an interesting thing, because when you go back into arch heathen times, there's a huge presence of fostering, especially amongst some of the higher ups, positions of power and respect. Fostering was seen as a great honor for the individual who is doing the fostering, as well as the individual who is having their child fostered. But it is not like it is now. This isn't foster care as we see it now is to deal with children that are out of placement, out of their family of origin for any particular reason, whether they're pulled from the home for an investigation, parents die. There's a number of case-by-case scenarios that lead up to a child being in foster care, and every single one of them is traumatic for the child. In the olden days, that's not what fostering was about. Yes, some of that did occur, obviously, but usually that was within clan, within tribe, and children were taken up by other members of the tribe, other members of the clan, and it wasn't a formalized thing so much as it was just simply what you did. You took care of your own. And so there wasn't so much a foster care system like that. The foster care system, as we know it, is actually fairly young, and I don't remember exactly when it kicked off, but it's only been around 50, 60 years or so. And it is a strange thing, and sadly in most states the foster care system is broken, because it is a monstrous thing and a huge undertaking, and anytime the state steps in and tries to be a parent, things go wonky. There are some great success stories that have come out of it, and there are some horror stories that have come out of it. I'm not going to go into any of those today, but they are things that are a reality to the world. So fostering today is very different from the way it was back then. What it would look like back then is, say, a chieftain or a king would send their son, their daughter, over to another family and allow them to live with that family for a period of time. They were taken into the web of that family. They were integrated into the weird of that family, and it was almost like an apprenticeship, as it were. It was a kind of light adoption. And they would take these individuals in and they would train them. They would give them skills. They would try and broaden their horizons, give them wider experiences. And it made for a well-rounded individual, especially with someone who was within a ruling class, because it would allow them to have more insights and more experiences than they would have just gotten within their family of origin. It was an honor to the individual who was doing the fostering, because this individual that is allowing their child to be fostered is showing a great deal of faith and trust. There's frith building that occurs here. There's a great deal of gefrain that is built. And so it was a wonderful thing and a very honorable thing. There was honor shown to both sides in the doing of this thing, and the foster parents were seen as a second set of actual parents. They were regarded as family, and it was a beautiful thing. Today's fostering system is very different, like I explained before. It's not so much about the honor and bestowment of honor. It is about meeting the needs of children in traumatic situations, and is a beautiful thing in its own right. So I want to immediately applaud all of the foster parents out there that are doing this thing, because it is not a simple thing. And for those of you that are looking into or exploring the idea of foster care, it is not an easy thing. It is a very hard life to take on. It is a very fulfilling life in a lot of ways, but there are a lot of hardships that come from being a foster parent, and it is a very difficult system to get into and a difficult system to stay in, especially with the growing litigations and hoops and legalities and everything that are being involved. There's new legislation going through every year that makes it more and more difficult to do what we do. The biggest complaint that I had within the field is probably the same thing that a lot of foster parents have, is that the people that are setting the laws upon which foster care is based are individuals that never fostered, that were never involved in the foster care system. They're lawyers, they're career politicians, they're individuals that have no idea what it actually takes to do what we do. And it's a rough deal, and as such, the laws don't always meet up with reality. Yes, they go out and they talk to different organizations that are involved in the foster care system. They get experts that come in and give all sorts of insights and whatnot, but let's be real. That's no way to fully really understand the foster care system and what is needed in it. Because essentially, even though they have these experts and everything in there, the experts are not the ones that are ultimately making the decisions or redesigning the foster care system. I have numerous opinions about it, but that's not what this is about. This is specifically about those foster parents that are heathen and are trying to find their way within the system. It's a difficult thing because the system is not built around heathenry. It is not built around heathen ideals or heathen codes of ethics or anything like that. Now, if you followed the channel for any length of time, you realize that when I say heathen worldview, heathen ethics, heathen morality, I'm not talking about some big book set in stone kind of thing. It's a tribe by tribe, clan by clan, hearth by hearth basis. And it is what matters to you in values that are, intrinsic to your worldview. There are a lot of things that different heathen families have in common, and that is where we get the basis for the quote-unquote heathen worldview or heathen ethics, heathen morality, things like that. But again, it's going to vary from family to family. And it gets to be difficult, especially when working within a system that doesn't understand you. Modern therapy does not understand heathenry. Modern therapy is built around a lot of research, a lot of tried and true human behavioral analytics and things like that. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a cornerstone of modern therapy today, and it's very effective in managing specific behaviors and helping to work with trauma. One of the main focuses now is trauma-informed care, and unfortunately, while that is a helpful tool to have in the toolbox, it is not a skeleton key for all locks, and there's an overfocus on it that is causing some difficulty for both foster parents and facilities out there that are trying to provide care for these kids, but have to now meet with buzzwords and this pop psychology approach to dealing with things, and they end up becoming pigeonholed into a specific modality that is effective in some cases, but not effective in all, and definitely not effective in all settings. So, and the foster parents out there know what I'm talking about, and those of you that don't, just know that it's not an easy world to exist in. It's very difficult, and it's getting more difficult by the day, unfortunately. It's part of the reason why I am looking at a career change, is because I am burnout from the system. It will take and take and take from you, and does not do much to give back. Now, one way that fostering differs from adoption is that foster parents usually do get a stipend for the care of the children from the fostering agency through which they work. It's not enough. It's never enough. It wasn't enough when I was working in the facilities. It's definitely not enough when you're trying to run a household, which is why work becomes a difficult thing to balance, because you still have to put food on the table. You still have to, keep the roof over the head, the lights on, and still try to provide for these kids what they deserve, because they're just kids and they're in a bad situation. They've got a bum rap. So it's a difficult thing. Now, the issue that this individual writing in had with their particular scenario is they've got a foster child in who's been through some stuff. And frequently what we see with kids that have been through some traumatic experiences like this through life, they tend to adopt maladaptive behaviors. These are behaviors that are set to cope with the emotions and the trauma and the tumult that is going on in their head. They have a just a whole slew of emotions that they are experiencing, but they are ill-equipped to experience. At their age and developmental point, they never should have been exposed to these traumatic events in the first place. They're just not equipped to deal with them yet. And even then, a lot of the things they're going through would be difficult for a well-adjusted adult to deal with, let alone a teenager who is still trying to figure themselves out, or a 7 or 10-year-old who has no idea what's going on or how to process these complex emotions that they are years away from being ready to truly process. At most, with those younger ones, we can manage behaviors and try to give nurturing support, but true processing of what's going on in the interaction of familial units, that's a difficult thing for foster kids to process at that age. They're just developmentally not there yet. For those of you that are familiar with Erikson's stages of social development, psychosocial development, you will find that the advent of complex rational thought, abstract thought specifically, is usually it usually sets in teenage years. You begin to see it in the early teenage years, and then through 15, 16, 17, it really starts to cement. This is the first point in their lives where they're really able to think outside of themselves and take into account the views of others. The focal point is, up to that point, it's very much just from within their head out. They are reacting to sensory input and the emotions that are inside, but they're not really able to think from another person's point of view yet. They can mimic it, which becomes very difficult for individuals working with these kids to be able to separate, because it looks like a child may be thinking outside of themselves and from a more abstract point, but what they're doing is they're mimicking behaviors and things they've heard adults say. And kids in the foster care system are exceptionally good at this because they have been exposed to more professionals in the field of psychology than most individuals experience in their entire lives. So they learn how to talk the talk and walk the walk and make it seem like they're working on their stuff when they're not. They're just giving you lip service in order to be able to get the pressure off of them and to take their time. And I find this a lot when kids are put into therapy and things like that. That's very forceful because there's a lot of requirements that the children be in therapy and have to go through these things. And the therapists do their best to work with the kids at the point that they are at, and they do what they can to help the kids process on their individual level. But when you bounce from home to home, or you bounce from facility to facility and from therapist to therapist, a lot of times you don't have time to build up a rapport, let alone have enough time to do any actual integrated work. So they get exposed to a lot of buzzwords, they get exposed to a lot of coping skills, the right things to say, and they learn how to manipulate the world around them by dropping the right words. It's mimicry. It's not actual synthesized thought. They're going through the motions a lot of times. And so you end up with kids that may seem like they're doing okay, but they've really bottled all this stuff up and have just given lip service to the work that needs to be done, or they've just out and out rejected it because they are not in a place mentally yet where they are able to do that. It takes time, it takes adjustment. And there's so many complex things that are going on in that process. I can't break it all down in one video, but it's not uncommon to see kids come through with very, very maladaptive behaviors. A lot of aggressive behaviors or antisocial type behaviors that compound because they experience frustrations and issues in their day-to-day lives that are compounded by the emotions that they are experiencing in their heads. And then beyond that, they go into having to deal with normal everyday stuff. It snowballs on itself. You know, they get the stress and anxiety from day-to-day life while they're still having to deal with these complex issues in their head that they're not ready to deal with yet. And as a result, a lot of kids do spin out of control and kind of go off the deep end for a little while. A large percentage of them will turn out fine. They're resilient. They will find a way in their adult life to adjust and figure things out and make their own path. It's just a rough ride to get to that point. And that's what this case was with this individual. To come back to the write-in that gave the birth to this particular thing, now that I've laid some of the groundwork, this kid in particular was having some really strong behavioral issues in the house, very, very disrespectful of the rules, very antisocial behaviors, and it's causing strife in the home. His wife had some fairly significant health issues that were being exacerbated by the behaviors and stressors placed on her by this child. And of course, she's in the home with the child more. He's working and away from the home, so he's not there to be able to intervene and to help keep these behaviors under control. And as a result, it was having a very negative impact on his wife. Now, those in the foster care system understand that when a placement breaks down, and it's time for a child to move on. Therapeutically, a lot of times it is better for the child to move on than to stagnate in a situation where they have just dug their heels in and it's a very negative, toxic environment. They need a fresh start so they have a chance to start over. A lot of times what they've done is they've dug themselves a hole in their behaviors and their actions that they can't quite get out of. And so a move will allow them a fresh start, a new set of people to interact with, a new blank slate for the most part. I mean, the reports of their behaviors and things like that follow, but a good foster parent will provide a blank slate for this kid to start over and try again. And that gives them a do-over on trying to process and build a relationship and just kind of normalize to a certain extent. Nothing's ever truly normal for a foster kid because the world in which they exist is not normal anymore because of the very fact that they are in foster care. There's a lot of push for normalcy. I'm sure that a number of my individuals in the foster care world just cringed when I said that word because there's a lot of legalese and stipulations right now about normalcy as a buzz term that have just, it's stuff we've been doing for ages anyway, but now they're trying to put it into law, and anytime the law steps in, things get muddy, and so that's a headache for a lot of us. You can't codify normalcy that way. It just doesn't work. So anyway, in all of this, heathens that, the modern therapy world doesn't understand heathenry. It doesn't understand Gefrain. It doesn't understand weird. It doesn't understand luck. It doesn't understand Orlog. It doesn't understand any of the things that are the basis of a heathen worldview. It doesn't understand the basis of a shame culture versus a guilt culture. And there's just so many things that Western psychology, as well as just Western civilization, doesn't jive. There's so many ways it doesn't jive with the heathen worldview. And most of us have a hard enough time trying to edge out our little corner of the world to do our heathen thing with our people. And trying to foster in all of that is an incredibly difficult process and a different process because the kids that you get through are not heathen. But they can benefit from heathen worldview. They can benefit from heathen ideals. They can benefit from the sense of individuality, the sense of power that they can get within their own life, their own control of things. There's a lot of things that I was able to do over the years where I would work in, especially We Are Our Deeds. That is one thing that is easily broken down and is something that kids can wrap their heads around, especially somebody who is dealing with behavioral issues. It's like, yes, you've got all of this going on, but you need to decide to work on this and not just shut down, because this is how people are going to see you, and this is the world you're going to build for yourself over time by doing these things. People are going to see you as a liar, as violent, and these things. In Western society that's built on, a guilt-based culture, forgiveness in a lot of things works differently. So there's a disconnect between some of the philosophical views of Western culture and even the cognitive behavioral approach of the therapy in which the kids are trying to work. So, there's a lot of the idea that if I love them enough, it'll fix it. And it's not. You have to actually train them. You actually have to work at it. So we see a lot of kids come through with bad behaviors, rough behaviors. And you do take on a certain amount of obligation to the children, both legally and just basic morally, when you take in a child for fostering. You've agreed that you're going to care for this kid and provide them what they need and try to help give them every ounce of support that you can so that the kid can get where they need to get to be able to normalize and have a well-functioning adult life. However, the problem is, like I said before, when the behaviors get too much and the kid needs a fresh start, you do need to move the kid on. That actually becomes an obligation of the foster parent to recognize when that window is there. And that is a hard thing, especially when you've got a big heart and you are reaching out trying to support a child and provide for them and do the fostering thing. Because there's a misconception amongst foster kids and some lay people on the outside that foster parents just do it for the money. I guarantee you right now, 100%, foster parents don't do it for the money. There's not enough money in it to make up for it. The money does not make up for the headache. The money doesn't make up for the sitting awake at night and worrying about somebody else's kid that you have taken in and tried to make your own and support and be there for. It just doesn't reflect the complexity of the situation, and it does not compensate for the sheer amount of stress that goes along with this. Now, there's some wonderful fostering experiences that are much less on the stressful side, but a vast majority of the time, it's hard enough to raise your own kids in this world. It's even more so difficult to raise somebody else's and to try and do right by them with the complexity of trauma that they've been through. So, yes, you're going to see kids come through that have behavioral issues. And in this instance, the best advice that I could give this guy is that you know what you need to do. You know that you need to move the child on. You know they need a fresh start. And you know that the situation has grown toxic and difficult for your family, for your hearth. And followers of the channel know I put hearth, clan, then tribe, and then, the Udengard is outside of that. By telling him this, all I can say is you know what you need to do. You've been there, you understand, you're experienced in the field. You just need somebody to tell you from a heathen standpoint that it's okay to do this, that you're not failing this child by moving them on. And you're not in this instance. You have first an obligation to your hearth. And if trying to take in this child and do right by this child is causing palpable damage to your hearth, it is your obligation first to your hearth to protect your hearth. You've got to move the kid on in order to protect that which is important to you and that which you value. Yes, this kid is somebody you've taken in and tried to provide a service for. And that's what it is. You are providing a service when you are a foster parent. It's different from adoption, where you take a kid in and the kid is yours and you have brought them into your familial web and you have mixed weird with the child on a level that is familial. You are still mixing weird with the child on a familial level when you're fostering, but it is as a service provider. You are, because it's very much a service. It's still family. You still try to make them as much a part of your family and belonging in a place. I mean, I don't want to make it sound cold and calculated. It's not by any means. It is a field that is nothing but heart. It is, you see all these people that deal with soulless jobs and heartless jobs that just drain them. Fostering is very much all heart, all soul, all the time. And so that's why it's even more so draining, and why the burnout rate is so high in the field is because it drains your soul to do it. There's a lot of ways that it can feed back in, but self-care is extremely important for individuals in the social working field because it is so draining and it is so taxing on an individual over time, especially when a lot of times you don't have a kid long enough to actually see the turnaround. You may plant a seed that provides them the turnaround they need in the future, but you may not see it in the time that they're with you, and you may never see the actual fruition of it because the kid moves on to a different facility, to a different foster home, or ages out of the program, and you may never find out. They may seek you out once they've become adults and everything, but if they don't, you'll never know. And that's also something that you have to deal with. So it's not like a production thing where you can spend 8 hours a day working on a line and then look at the number of products that you created and be like, I did a thing today. There's a measurable output for the effort that I have put in. Foster care is not like that. It is not. It is output, 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 output. But you never actually see the gain of that necessarily. Sometimes you do, but most of the time you don't. And it's a difficult thing to do. There's some individuals that I'm sure will comment, that I'm sure will jump in on the Facebook group and everything and tell of the wonderful experiences they've had with fostering and some of the great things that they've been able to see and do. And I applaud you guys. You've done a fantastic job. And I am happy for you that you've gotten the positive feedback and the reinforcement that comes along with that. I genuinely am. That's something that not enough foster parents get, not enough people in this field get. Because keep in mind, I'm talking about foster parents here, but there's case managers, there's therapists, there's administrators, there's facility staff. There's a whole different side of this that's not just foster parents. There's group homes, there's residential treatment centers, there's emergency care shelters, there's assessment centers, all these different facets that work with. And there's not really group homes anymore. They changed the terminology and legal side of things. They're now general residential operations, which encompasses a wide field of what we do. And these people work very, very hard and get even less of that positive reinforcement that foster parents do. So the burnout rate with them is even higher than with foster parents, and it's tough. So obligation is a big thing. Yes, you have obligations to those that are in your charge, but you also have a higher obligation to hearth and home. And so you've got to put that obligation first if you're going to be able to survive it. Otherwise, doing this will take so much that it will destroy hearth. It really will. Whether you're working in a facility or you are trying to out-stubborn a foster kid that just needs that one right person to help them break through and to get somewhere and turn things around. It's okay if that's not you. You're not going to be able to save every one of them. You can't. You just can't do it. You can save the ones you can, and saving is a bad term. I hate that term when it comes to foster care. I mean, it's something that's used as a buzz term. You help. You can't save any of them. They have to save themselves. It's a big thing in, that independence, that taking ownership of one's behaviors, of one's actions. We are our deeds element of things. I don't like the idea of this outward force coming in and saving this child. It makes the individual feel good, but it doesn't reflect what's actually going on with this child and what this child is experiencing. All we can do is try and teach and help equip a child with the skill sets that they need to be able to do the work themselves and get through it, because ultimately they're the only ones that can do it. Nobody can decide to do this for them. They have to do it themselves. Which is why when you have situations like this, as a heathen in the field, it can be exceptionally difficult. Got a big heart to begin with, a strong sense of obligation from heathen worldview and heathen ethics, and then this weird juxtaposition of obligation to the child and obligation to the hearth. Obligation to the hearth has to trump. It has to. It's a tough decision. It's a hard decision. It is not easy to make. It is probably tear-filled in a number of instances. It's tough. It's really tough. Even running a facility, I had a hard time sometimes moving on some kids that I just wanted to out-stubborn and help. I just wanted to be that one that was like, all right, I am going to out-stubborn you long enough that you can see somebody cares. But ultimately speaking, I had the other kids in the house that I had to consider. I had my staff I had to consider. And I had to make the decision in the end that was best for all of them, within, of course, the limitations of the law and standards, minimum standards. Ooh. So, foster parents have to deal with all of this. They have to deal with minimum standards. They have to deal with oversight from licensing, contracts, all of this stuff coming in and making sure they're doing what they're doing and they're doing it right. And this is a very punitive thing. You will get good licensing reps that try to come through and help you as a foster parent or as a facility, but you can't get around the fact that the law is built around trying to crunch you, trying to catch you in doing wrong and then punishing you for doing wrong. There's not a lot of rewarding for doing right in this field. It's very much a try to work yourself out of a job kind of field. You want to do everything that you can so that they no longer need you. Unfortunately, there will always be another batch of kids coming through because bad things continue to happen to kids. It's just unfortunate, and it is real. It's a very real reality of the world. So It's tough, especially in a world where the laws are changing in such a way that are very, very difficult for individuals to continue doing the good work that they need to be doing, that they feel they want to do. And I find a lot of people, this is another area of heathenry and foster care, that is difficult. A lot of facilities, a lot of organizations are religiously based, and it's difficult for a heathen to find their place amongst that, because these facilities, these organizations want to include a lot of Judeo-Christian ideology, teachings. You walk into an office and they've got Bible scripts up on the wall kind of thing. And it's difficult for a foster family that is heathen to feel like they have a place in this. You can absolutely have a place in this. However, you can't teach the kids to be heathen, because you have to meet them where they're at and their cultural and religious needs and their cultural and religious backgrounds. Being heathens, that gives us an exceptional insight in being able to do that, though. That is a strength for heathens in the fostering system, because we are used to not being the normal. We are used to not getting our religious needs met by the greater world around us, and we have to think outside the box in order to meet our religious needs in a day-to-day life and day-to-day world, to try to find our place in it. So when a kid comes through the system that doesn't fit into the general Judeo-Christian views of everything, we get it, and we can step up and we can help them in a way that other individuals can't. And I've had kids of all different religions and backgrounds and cultural heritages come through that I was able to help in a way that other facilities might not have, because I'm aware of different things. Being from heathenry, being from something that's more on the fringe of the religious world as opposed to the big book main religions, quote unquote, I'm able to look at it and say, oh, you don't need that. I'm not going to force you to go to church with the rest of the group. You need some books on this. You need some experience on this. You need me to connect you with these individuals that are, if you're interested in paganism, then I'm going to support that. I'm going to be there for you, and I'm going to help you do that. If you are interested in whether it's Greek, Egyptian, if you are from India or from somewhere in the Middle East, or you just have a Muslim background, a Hindu background, and something from the Pacific Islands, something from of Chinese origin, Japanese origin, because heathens tend to wander a bit before we get to where we are, we have experiences that will help us go, hey, I get it. Let me help you meet your needs, And even then, we're also able, because all of the big book stuff is thrown in our face all the time, we know what we need to do to help them meet their needs there, because we experience it on a day-to-day basis. We have to deal with it. So we know that a Catholic kid's going to need to go to Mass, and we know that that's going to be different from what a Baptist kid may need or what a Presbyterian kid may need, and we can meet those needs. It's not always an easy thing, because sometimes we don't have the connections there because we're not of that world. And so that creates a barrier that we then have to work through. But there's enough individuals around that can help with that if you've got a kid come through that is of the big book religions, you can still get their needs met. But you can also help broaden their experience and horizons through introducing them to heathen ideologies that will help them just generally be better people, like we are our deeds. Helping them to understand how past influences through like Orlog, through Weird, and future directions, you can kind of help them see how to build a better path for themselves in the future without pushing heathenry per se. You can teach them to be accountable for their own actions through We Are Our Deeds without pushing them to be heathen. You never have to mention heathenry at all. Just the statement, We Are Our Deeds, alone in and of itself is all about accountability. And that is something they very much need to be taught, because the system is not built to teach them accountability. The system is built on, oh, you are a victim, Let us treat you like a victim. Let us protect you. Let us, when you do something wrong, it's not your fault. You're not the one that did something wrong. This is due to your trauma history, or this is due to, your rough upbringing. They get a pass. I cannot tell you the number of kids that came in, did something that should have landed them in jail, and walked away scot-free because they knew they could put on the waterworks, tell them they're a foster kid, and get a free pass. And then they would turn around and do it again, because it did not teach them accountability. It taught them to manipulate the system. And I would step in and, through heathen ideologies, help to teach them to be accountable for their behaviors. Now, it was an uphill struggle because the rest of the world is teaching them something different. And sometimes I would get through, sometimes I wouldn't. A lot of times I wouldn't. Sometimes I would lay a seed that I think would probably set in and make a difference later on. But I wouldn't always know because, especially as an emergency care shelter where they've got a maximum length of stay of 90 days unless I get variances, I didn't get a whole lot of feedback on the kids once they left, and we did not get enough time with them to really ingrain anything and show them on a real-world basis the way this works and the way this plays out. And that's something that foster parents can do. You can teach them accountability through this, and you can show them how this works in real life and in real action. You can actively engage this and model this behavior for them and encourage accountability through this. And so that's a good, strong thing that heathens can bring to the foster care system that other religions may not necessarily. So there's a winning point for heathens in foster care. There's a lot of ups, there's a lot of downs, there's a lot of ins and outs and complexities to it that just make it difficult for a foster parent in general. So fulfilling your obligations to the child it's an important thing. It's a very important thing. It's why you do what you do. But you cannot lose sight of your innengard, because the child ultimately, the goal is to try and help bring the child in and let them experience innengard. That's the goal. That's what you would like for them to do. They haven't experienced innengard before. They've experienced the tumultuous explosion and degradation of innengard. They have experienced very toxic wells. And this is a chance to help try and wash away some of that toxicity. This is a chance to try and instill some strengths in them to model how the world could be, while still balancing out the fact that you can't push heathenry by law. So they can still ask questions, and you can still educate them if they are interested in it, and you can support their learning in it, but you can't be perceived as pushing it because you are then not being respectful of their cultural heritage. And that's extremely important. We as heathens should understand that above all else, is that we wouldn't want to be put into a home and then have their viewpoints pushed on us. We can't do the same thing to them. And because of our experiences as heathens, we're more likely to be understanding of that and to be considerate of cultural differences and cultural backgrounds. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up on this one for now. This is an area where I can come back and talk about a lot more in the future if you guys are interested. It is an area where I have a great deal of, I would say, expertise in this field, simply because I do have a great deal of training in this field and a lot of experience, boots on the ground, grassroots stuff, working with kids in the foster care system and the world of psychology in general, and trying to be a heathen in all of that, because that's a thing, I'm not one of those that converted from a big book religion to heathenry. I was brought up very, very free in my religious views. I didn't have anything pushed on me by my parents. And so, we were encouraged to find something spiritual, to find our place in the world, and I did. I found it very early on and have made my way in that ever since. But that makes me different from a lot of people, because a lot of people did come from Judeo-Christian backgrounds and are finding their way in heathenry now as a result of that. But as a result of that, I've dealt with my entire adult life and my entire professional life as a heathen, not as a convert, but as a heathen. And so I have a lot of experience in trying to find my way in the professional world as a heathen. And it's not always easy, but you don't have to make it difficult either. I find a lot of people that have difficulty with it are still in a point of spiritual development where they are making things more difficult for themselves than they need to. So, that's something to take into account too. You have to make sure that you are strong and steady in your own cultural standing before you try and do something like this. Because if you are still trying to deal with baggage and whatnot from a rough transition or a rough background, that's going to bleed over into the fostering process and will lead to some negative interactions and some headaches on down the line that you don't need. So make sure to take some time. If you are looking to become a foster parent, make sure that you're strong in your hearth before you do that. You don't want to bring a kid who's in a rough time into a home that's going through a rough time. You want to be that strong point for them. And I don't know a lot of people these days that get to say they're in a strong point. You don't have to be perfect. I mean, come on, let's be real. Nobody is. So, we're not expecting you to go in and have all of your ducks in a row and have all your stuff together. But you're going to transition your baggage onto the child, and it's going to color your interactions with that kid. So just make sure you got your stuff as in check as you can before you do this. But if you are looking to become a foster parent, I encourage you to. It's a rough thing. It's a tough world, but it is very fulfilling when it is fulfilling. And they need help. It's something I think Frigga would smile on. And that's something that every time one of my kids would leave and I'd see them go off to a new place, I would whisper a little prayer to Freya and to Frigga to watch over the kids as they go forward and hopefully grant them luck and strength in whatever they went on to. I wouldn't know. I never got the feedback. But I'd still whisper the prayer. It's why I did what I did. It's why you do what you do. So, best of luck to you all out there. Hang in there. Things may get a little wonky through the holiday season. This is going to be the last episode that comes out before my Yule season starts. We start our Yule. We do the big 12 days of Yule. I know I'm not getting into the whole historical Yule aspect of things. That's my tribal tradition, is that we do Mother's Night on the 19th, and then that starts our 12 days of Yule, and then 12th night falls on New Year's Eve for us. That's just the way we're structured. That's the way we do things. We know our whys within our tribal belief structure and tribal mythology, and we're good with it. So, but that being said, I don't know exactly how my release schedule is going to work through the holidays. And so if I go dark for a little bit, I'm not pod fading on you guys, I promise. I just have a lot going on with the holidays and can't guarantee that I'll get every Wednesday, but we'll see. I'm sure you guys understand. In the meantime, thank you all. Hail to you. May your hearth fires burn bright. Okay, let's rock and roll. Lose the shades. Ha ha ha. Hair out. Fun! Ha ha. So, we're gonna hang the glasses off the tripod here just because we can. Hair is a mess, don't care. You guys don't you guys don't subscribe and watch for my hair, how I look. It's for the content. Alright guys, so let's update on some stuff, alright? If I can get my spacing right here. So, life is rocking along. Life is still good. Step at a time, working on the stuff from my dad's company. I know some of you signed in and saw the ad that I did for my dad's company. Thank you guys for watching. Please feel free to share that around if you want to. Anything that we can do to help kind of boost the company indirectly supports the channel. It allows me to continue existing so I can continue to do content like this. So hopefully you guys will continue to show that support, and I really appreciate it. I really do. So my last video that I put out on the bowl, man, that got some pretty good traction. I was surprised to see that you guys were so interested in the project side of things, and it has given me some ideas for some future videos. I do a lot of those little projects on the side. I'm not the kind of craftsman that puts out, store level kind of stuff. I don't necessarily put out incredible works of art or things like that. Actually, if you guys could see some of the carvings that my dad does, he does chainsaw art and wood carving and things like that. It was his pyrography set that I was borrowing to do the bowl. And man, he does some absolutely gorgeous stuff. I'll see if I can't showcase some of it here on the channel at some point so you guys can see. He's really gifted at that stuff, and it always impresses me. Folks that have a master of the visual arts are just incredible to me. Yeah, you guys follow the channel, you know I'm more a performer of the spoken word or of performance arts and things like that. That tends to be where my forte is, and writing. I do a lot of writing, and that just tends to be where my strength is. When it comes to woodwork, I do a lot of rune work, and right now I'm working on some projects that I think you guys might find interesting. We'll see what I can turn into something for the channel. Thought about maybe breaking down and doing a step-by-step like I did with the bowl, but do it for a rune set that I would make. And because I haven't made a rune set in a while, I've got my own personal one that I made back in the day, and I've made a few as gifts here and there. And if you guys are interested in that, let me know. I'll put together a video for that and see where it goes. But thank you very much for the support on the video and just in general. I had really good reviews and a lot of good feedback on it. So thank you very much. It was interesting to have this surprise that the bowl wasn't actually wood, but I actually really liked the way that it turned out in the end, especially once I put the spray coating on it, and it really shines and really looks good. So I'm excited to put that one into use. So once again, thank you all. I greatly appreciate it. I should have some more fun stories and stuff from D&D coming up. My players and I are going to do a session here this coming weekend, so hopefully we'll have some fun antics that they get up to and things like that. So, you know, here's hoping. Things will be good. I am going to adjust my level here just a bit. Get a close-up of my ugly mug. There we go. That's better. That's better. I'm working on trying to get my spacing and everything right. We'll see. Try to get the hammer in the shot. People like to see the hammer when they're talking to a heathen. So, all right. Other than that, life is rocking along. So thank you all for the continued support. I very much appreciate it in every venue that you guys have. Y'all are an amazing audience, and I love interacting with you. I am backlogged on my emails right now because I've been focusing on some other things. As you guys know, 2020 has been a rough year for everybody. I know I am not the only one that's in a situation because of this year. And so you guys know. I'll get back to my emails, I promise. It's something I have to set aside a little time for, and right now I've got several things on the docket, so I will get to it just as soon as I can, because what I have gleaned from the headlines and whatnot, I've looked at them. There's some really good emails in there with some really good questions and really good insights, and I cannot wait to dig into those and really, see what I can do with them. Either give them personal replies or turn them into videos for the channel, which is actually how we got today's episode. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I haven't shot it yet, wibbly wobbly timey wimey stuff, but we shall see. So anyway, that's enough for an update for now. Let's go ahead and jump to the episode, shall we? All right, we're live in 3, 2, 1. Let's jam. Hi, Come on, dude, you haven't screwed up an intro in a long time. What's going on here? I thought you were, good at this. Come on now. 3, 2, 1, let's jam.